Well, welcome to the Busy Working Show. Matthis Schultz, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. Glad to be here.
Excellent. What have you been up to lately?
Just been busy working.
Outstanding. So, what are some of the things that you're working on?
A lot of things, a lot of different areas. For our organization in particular, we work across all industries, predominantly here in the U.S. So companies of all sizes, from music and entertainment all the way to uh, shipping and logistics, tech companies, you name it, we're involved in it. And a lot of our focus is really around scale ups and capitalization and a lot of other key initiatives for those organizations and current market conditions and things currently going on in today's world means I'm a little more busy than usual.
Yeah, no doubt. So, as you're working with these businesses across the country and industry as well, what would you say your superpower is and what you bring to bear for them?
Just really, really good at being able to almost intuitively understand businesses and what makes
Mhm.
them tick and an an uncanny ability to build very simple mouse traps out of complex issues, which essentially would translate to high profitability, high sustainability, low risk, and multiple other components that really build a viable, strong business that has the opportunity to withstand the test of time and or
Mhm.
be sold and or raise lots of money or whatever the specific path for that company or trajectory should be.
Yeah. So, how would you say you came about this superpower, the ability to be that intuitiveness and building those mousetraps? How did you come about that?
I was raised as an entrepreneur essentially. I started my first company at 14, had my first patent at 14. During my developmental years, I was enamored in selling products and scaling a business and handling manufacturing and packaging and distribution. And that business was successfully acquired, and I went into other stuff. And so, whereas most kids played sports and hung out with their friends, I was building a business only in school, maybe a week and a half throughout each month and at trade shows and selling products. And so my my upbringing was very, very different, which so my perspective is very different. And on top of just that alone, business and finance and strategy and really solving tough problems and helping other people and develop them is just kind of in my nature and something I'm just innately passionate about as well. So it was kind of the perfect storm that really came together to essentially launch me in the direction to where I am today.
Yeah. So, starting at an early age like that, there you had somewhere along the lines you were really encouraged to explore that. So, when you think about how that developed, how what part of that is your support system? How did that come to bear for you to be able to start that early? Because that's amazing to start that early.
it, it really wasn't anything. I was always a very, you know, curious person and wanted to know how everything worked. And I was always building and tinkering and playing. And I had that type of mentality. And so for us, we went camping and we bought a tripod grill, and it was a terrible product. It was made out of aluminum. There was no factoring for heat distribution, so you burnt your hands on the damn thing. It hung on three chains as a tripod as well. So the aluminum grill grate that they put on it, number one, got gross really fast. And because it was hanging on chains, weight distribution wasn't on it. You put six hot dogs on one side and six burgers on the other, you lose the whole thing to the fire. It had the chain was made to adjust, but you couldn't even adjust it because the chain got way too hot being over an open fire for as long as it had to.
Mhm.
We got rained out, and on the way home, parents were furious, and dad was complaining, and all these fun things going on. And I just kind of sat there, and I ended up drawing schematics for a grill that solved all those problems. And he came home with a welder and steel and said, "We're going to do this." And my first time welding was tack welding a table to weld the prototype on, which led to the creation of the Campfire Cook and seven other patents and product lines down the road, and a lot of fun. But it wasn't even like I was trying to do anything. It just, we got into it. And the next thing you know, my parents were like, we should really start a business around this. And so we ended up starting a business around this. My parents still worked full time. So I was managing most of the other stuff. They were constantly taking vacation days to go to these trade shows with me for, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for a 4-day weekend, take 2 days off of work and working overtime and trying to help me with calling banks and managing finances and make sure I wasn't getting us in any legal troubles because they were the grown adults in that situation, regardless of my drawings that led to everything and me welding the first thing with my dad. But yeah, long
Yeah.
story short, that's kind of the birthplace of what gave me my first bite of entrepreneurship, and I have never let go of it since.
Oh, that's amazing. So a practical experience really was the catalyst to applying your curiosity, and then it just never stopped, really.
And then my parent, really my dad was a huge enabler. He enabled me my whole entire life, sometimes for good things, sometimes for not good things, but every single time he was my number one hype man. Like, I could come with the wildest idea possible, and there was times that I was like, oh my god, we should shoot this old fridge we pulled out of our basement or whatever. And he's like, it'd be even cooler, load it with 40 pounds of tannerite.
And that, I did you have any video of that? Because that has got to be
No,
something
this
spectacular.
was this is back in the 90s. I don't even think we owned a video camera at that point.
That is
Not even
awesome.
most families had cell phones yet at that point. So
Yeah, that's hilarious. I have to. Well, later we'll talk about a story I've got for Tannerite. And I asked a friend to use their property for some of it, and it's like, well, maybe we probably should have did it at a different location. But so from a where you're at now, all you've learned, what have you picked up along the way from a standpoint of the legacy that you're building? Is that something that you've been mindful along the way, or is that something that is kind of left for looking back? Where would you say you are in your journey versus your legacy?
I am always in the now. I'm rarely in the past or the future. I'm always kind of just in the relative, right? So it's interesting. I followed my journey based on my passions. There's not always been a direct sense or course of why I've went the directions I've went. But it all kind of came together in the right circumstance, which ironically I did everything ass backwards, but it all came out in the same trajectory as it always does. Just a lot younger for me. So whereas I started at 14 with my first company, first exit at 19, most people start at 30 and have their first exit by 40, 45. By 50, they get into VC. I'm now in my mid 30s, and now I play heavily in those spaces as well. Um, and so the trajectory was all the same. I went through the same linear path essentially, but I just skipped the entire line. There was absolutely, I wasn't doing it to do it for anybody else other than myself, and because that's just what I was driving me at that very time. So, and in terms of creating a legacy, I'm not even really trying to create a legacy. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy business. It's something I'm truly passionate about and I love. And it's something that I'm able to help others, succeed. And for most people, their legacy is, what do they leave behind for their kids, and what do they leave
Mm-hmm.
behind for all these other things? I don't have kids and I don't intend on having kids. That's just really not part of my path or purpose and what I want to pursue. And that is, perfect for me and my wife and our situation. But
Mm-hmm.
that also means that I basically get to live my life on my terms, which is my number one thing. For me, it's all about financial freedom, flexibility, and family, right? And to be able to do that means that I have the ability to travel whenever I want and see my
Mm-hmm.
wife a lot and spend a lot of time with her and with family, and to live my life to the fullest with nothing holding me back to any degree. I don't have to worry about, is there going to be, $5 million left over for my kids, when I'm gone. I just have to make sure that there was enough there to last me and my wife a lifetime. Anything past that, unfortunately, I'm the end of my line, which is a crazy thing to have to come to terms with in your own head.
Sure. So would you say that your legacy is less looking back, but actively building with the companies that you work with? Because you said that you've had some exits, now you're playing in the VC world. Is that just from a funding standpoint, or are you working closely with businesses to help build what they're teaching
I'm
and leaving?
I'm solely focused on my own assets and my own acquisitions in terms of anything like that. I collect and build assets. That's what I do. Things that
Gotcha.
pay me dividends in cash. That's my game of Monopoly that I play in real life that I just absolutely love. On the other side of that, I know the downsides of VC and I know the downsides of entrepreneurship and startup life and building a
Mhm.
business. And I know how complicated it is. And there is no way to predict what really happens in those companies. There can be signals and things that you can lean on to some degree. But in my case, um, I work solely as a consultative standpoint, and that's what our firm's standpoint is to be a consultant advisor and
Mhm.
coach really in working with the leadership and CEOs of these, lower middle market privately held companies.
Mhm.
Um, to either help them with either scaling up if they're a fast growing startup, or if they're a legacy privately held business that's fairly mature that needs a turnaround or is looking to exit in some degrees, being able to help them get their business in a position that they're going to be able to achieve those things, because most business owners quickly come to find out that their business isn't sellable, or it's not worth what
Mhm.
they thought it was, or that
Yeah.
their kids do not want the company. And so that there is no passing it down at this point. You put
Yeah.
35 years into this thing. There's always so many different variables of the situations, but it always kind of comes down to, scale ups, turnarounds, funding, exits, and really from a consultative capacity. But through my consulting engagements, I've syndicated and been part of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital transactions in
Mhm.
business as well, without me having to necessarily be the active investor in that, right? And
Sure.
that's where my strong point is. It's where I'd rather be. I get bored with things in a short amount of time, and for me to be tied to anything for too long is risky. There's always those one or two that stick for that have stuck with for a long time, but in
Mhm.
most cases, I like to try to focus on, like, let's just focus on the 6 months and then focus on another 6 months and focus on another. Like, I can only really commit for about 6 months at a time and then renew.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Well, I mean, would you say that's something because the intensity at which you put forth, is that something that you've learned about just kind of setting those benchmarks for yourself along the way?
It's manageable. It's measurable. It's something that forces you, yeah, to set realistic expectations and goals of what you're looking to achieve in those short time frames. It also helps
Mhm.
with financial parameters of the engagement and scope creep. Because obviously, after the first 30, 60, 90, and especially at 6 month mark, um, in any engagement, things change drastically. And what people thought my involvement would be by engaging with us and our firm at Elite Ventures Group, um, turns out to be that they actually need me in their organization, like almost fractional for long
Mhm.
periods of time, and that I'm actually not, it's not just capital, it's not just sales and profits and revenue, it's not just operations or marketing or any of that, or strategy. It is really encompassing the whole entire thing. And it's really like having a second CEO, sitting at the helm with you to make sure you have your six at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a question for you. If you wrote yourself a letter today to be opened by yourself in, let's say, 15, 20 years, what would you write yourself?
It doesn't matter. Don't take life seriously. Enjoy your time. It's People overcomplicate life way too much. Life is super short,
Hmm.
and it goes by really, really fast. And there's turnings or phases in each person's life, and there's roughly four turnings in one lifetime. And through those, they're about 25-year gaps. Massive changes happen in your life that you can't go back and correct those mistakes anymore. It's almost like
Mhm.
a permanent set in stone. That is your history. Um, and I've spent a lot of time second guessing myself, fearing things, getting way too deep and being my worst critic. I've let myself, not do things that I wish I would have done. And I've I've thought that I was doing it because hustle culture and I love entrepreneurship, and to
Mm.
that degree, people pass, time passes, opportunities pass, relationships pass, um, and you're left dealing with that. And at the end of the day, the problems that you face today in a year aren't going to mean anything to you. And people get so worked up over their day to day issues, but have no relation to the long term picture and how short that long term picture really is.
Mhm.
And through that, finding that happiness is a choice, and you have to make a conscious decision to be happy every day.
Mhm.
Um, I worked 80-hour weeks, for 12 years straight at one point. And that was most of
Wow.
my 20s.
Yeah.
I didn't go to the bar. I didn't go do all that other stuff. I sacrificed a lot of relationships in the mix. It
Mhm.
paid off, but at what price?
Yeah.
But I was always, oh, I'll wait till this Saturday when friends are available and we'll go kayaking or we'll go mountain biking or we'll go hiking or go do this. And then Saturday came along and I was exhausted, or work crept up and I had to get a few more things done that morning and didn't end up
Yeah.
going, or it ended up being pouring rain out and, it was just not conducive to do that. So that got skipped. So I delayed happiness for a week and now I had to delay it for another week. And I was always, once I get this, or once I do this, or once this happens, I will be happy. I was always chasing the next and living in a perpetual
Mm.
state of unhappiness, and that really did fuel my drive and passion and success, but it also fueled a lot of unhealthy habits as well. And
Sure.
through that, taught me that I have to be in the now at all times.
Yeah.
I don't weigh my past very much. I really don't put much weight in the future. At the end of the day, what can we do right now? What can we do in the next 6 months? That is the longest time frame I like to think in. I just, you never know where you're going to be in 12 months.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that is, I mean, it's important to not to have that balance and be mindful of the moment, and things can come up. If you keep pushing them off, you can lose a lot of opportunity. And not, we typically say opportunity from a business standpoint, but opportunity with just life, with family and friends. If we are always pushing something off to do later, I mean, I find that in my own life, that's for sure. So, as you've gone through and you've interacted with some, I'm sure, some very fascinating businesses from a community involvement standpoint and kind of philanthropic work, do you see that as a balance that is also part of what is even a present legacy and it brings a balance to a business, regardless of their size?
No, not really. Um, I take a very controversial view to something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about what can you do through your organization that makes a larger impact. I feel most of the uh, philanthropic work that is done is, the benefit is not because they necessarily care about those organizations. They may pick them because they do care about them as well, and it does hit a soft spot for them.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest benefit those people or corporations are getting are financial and tax breaks. The
Yeah.
biggest piece they're getting is a self pat on the back that they did something good. It's something that they can use to justify another action down the road in some cases.
Yeah.
If you're building a house and you keep giving the bricks to your neighbor, you'll have an incomplete house and they'll have a complete house. So now you're at a disservice to yourself with the ability to help nobody, and not even yourself, because you can't put a roof over your head. Whereas if you would have had the nerve to just say no, I'm focused on my own selfish well-being right now, you could have built a house and brought your neighbor's family into yours as well. So just because you're selfish doesn't mean you're being an asshole either.
Sure.
I'm very self-driven and self-focused in a lot of ways, and I bring that same approach to the businesses I work with as well. Is we have to be very focused, almost selfishly, on the business and our customers and our core value and our core focus and our core reasons for being here. Anything else is a distraction. And so I'm really, kind of a different person in how I view the world in a lot of those senses, because again, minimizing distractions is what most people should be doing. I could go on a huge rant about how social media has completely destroyed our whole entire world.
Oh, absolutely. There's plenty of that. That's probably more than a rant. You could probably write like 4 or 5 books on that.
Oh, most definitely. And the whole thing is I can back up every single fact behind it too. And it's just, it's just craziness what people focus on versus what really matters.
Yeah.
And whether that's, and a business can only go as far as the leader is able to take the business, and
Hmm.
they become the glass ceiling in that. And without the right guidance and direction and structure, the most people focus on the wrong things, or procrastinate in certain areas out of fear. That is, it's completely unnecessary. There's a lot more that can be done through execution than
Hmm.
procrastination or strategy.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, so what would you say, as we wrap up, what would be the best if somebody wanted to work with you, how would they do that, and who would be a good fit for you?
Generally, any privately held business in the lower middle market here in the US, and we predominantly work only with CEOs, in terms of our client base.
Hmm.
To do that would just be to go to eliteventures.co,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
fill out the contact form, and we'll review it. And if there's an interest on our side, we will reach back out, and we'll go through and have an introductory call and see if it's a good fit. And we take the process slow from there. But we aren't for everybody.
Hmm.
And that is one of the things we are very well aware of.
Yeah.
And we look for a very certain type of leader and mindset and organization, and a certain vibe, if you will,
Hmm.
that almost needs to be checked off. And through that, then we can both come to terms if there's a formal engagement to be had.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I really appreciate you joining and having a conversation. I'll never look at a camping tripod uh, stove again the same way. But I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to seeing and tracking your progress on LinkedIn.
Likewise, Paul, it was a pleasure.